in a conference a few years ago at a session talking about the most in-demand job skills in job postings across all industries. And the number one job skill across all industries was Excel. And I just wanted to point out, here's another website that lists the 8 most in-demand job skills for 2018. Interesting to note that 1 is coding and number 2 is Excel. Here's another website that talks about why learn Excel. Here's 4 good reasons. And I want to focus in on this last one. Excel will make you better at your job no matter what that is. And then finally, a website that shows a breakdown of jobs that require Excel. And of course, these are pretty much all in business. But Excel is used, as I said, in every industry and will benefit you greatly. But since you're learning coding, I also wanted to point out that we can use C# to front end a Excel spreadsheet and use that spreadsheet maybe as a source of data or actually as a source of information that we can manipulate. And we can also use C# to do things like formatting of Excel spreadsheets. In the latest versions of Excel, we have a really cool feature that allows us to do conditional formatting of cells based on values or values of other cells. But before the days where we could do that in Excel, you could actually do it through C# and change colors of both the text and the background. And I'm going to demonstrate that in a little project that I just created to show how you can use Excel as a backend in a C# program. So let's take a look. Let's begin by looking at the 2 spreadsheets we're going to use in this project. This spreadsheet is called Statesxlsx, and it simply is information of the 50 states alphabetically listed from Alabama to Wyoming. So we see the state, we see the abbreviation, the population in 2010 from the census, and an estimated population in 2016. And we can use those 2 numbers to determine the amount of growth that the state has seen in those 6 years. And then the order in which they entered statehood, the year of statehood, the month, and the day. So this is one way of breaking out a date already separated by year, month, and day. The capital of each state. Is that the most populous city in the state? And it's simply a no-yes value. The governor. The birthday of the governor, so we can determine the age of the governor, and then which party they belong to, Republican or Democratic Party. One thing I want to point out is when you're looking at Excel, you're looking at a formatted data presentation. So for example, for the birth date here, we have a format of 15- and the month of 3 letters and the year, the last 2 digits of the year. And that's what we see, but underlying that is the data. I'm going to click on that cell, and you'll see that the underlying data is 10/15/1944. And when we bring this into C#, we're not going to see this value, we're going to see the underlying value. Same with the population. We see that it's 4,779,736. Well, same value underlying it, but without the commas. It's not formatted. So it's just something to be aware of as you're working with data. If you wanted to search and pull out the month, if you try to figure out where the dashes or hyphens were to pull out the month, that's not going to work. Instead, you need to pull out the digits that are in front of the first slash. This is all in a worksheet called StateInfo. Then I have another spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet is called StateMap.Xlsm, and it has the M extension because it has a macro in it that we're going to use. It simply, again, contains all 50 states and then a number, and the numbers are going to be set by our program to 0 except for the current state. So in this case, you'll see Alabama, and the map then reflects the number. So if I change to Indiana and set Alabama to 0, we would see Indiana. If I set Arizona at 1 and then set Indiana at 0, it would highlight Arizona. And our program, our C# program, would update these values based on the current state we're looking at in our data, and then reflect the title here, which would be reflected in the chart. And then I have a macro that exports the chart to a JPEG file that is then imported into a picture box in C#. Really quickly, I'll just show you the macro. So the macro is called map test. Let's just look at edit so we can see the code. So here's the code of the macro. I use range cell E2 to set the path of my current worksheet and the file name of map.jpg. It's going to be a JPEG file. Activate the chart object, select it. I set the caption of it to whatever is in E1. That's the state that we want to highlight. And then I refresh the chart and then export it to whatever the file name is in cell E2. Now I'm going to tell you up front that this does not work perfectly, and I'm having an issue in that it works the first time, but then in subsequent attempts the map.jpg file is locked for editing, and this Excel spreadsheet can also become locked for editing. And it creates some problems and causes my program to not work correctly when moving from state to state in the data, as we'll see in a minute. So I've been trying to figure out a solution around that. I still have not found that solution. So this is my challenge to all of my students. If you can figure out how to get this map to update correctly in the program I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you 3 bonus points. Okay, so let's take a look at our program. I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save it. So I named the file Excel backend. That's my executable. And you'll see that those 2 spreadsheets are in the same folder. Here's the map.jpg. And we'll change the value of that map. Notice that right now it says 2:11 p.m. We're going to see that change as we run our program. So let me run Excel backend just so you can see it run, and then we'll look at the code. So here's my program. I'm going to get the Excel data. So this will provide a link to our Excel Statesxlsx file. And one of the things I want to demonstrate is that I can actually change contents. So in cell A1, I have the United States info about each state, and I'm going to change that to changed programmatically by C#. So we can see that reflected. And rather than change it to my original file, I'm going to save it as a new file. But I want you to see that you can not only read data from Excel, you can also write data to Excel. So it's reading all the state information, and it's putting that into a list of a class that I wrote for the state information. And then I open that other spreadsheet, and I choose to highlight Alabama and export that as the map and bring that into this picture box. So that works great on the first time. I have some buttons here to cycle through the 50 states. So I'm going to click the next button, and we go to Alaska, and you'll see that I kind of go into an endless loop at that point. And it's a problem because of, I believe, that the map.jpg cannot be updated because it's in locked view. I've searched for different ways to get around that. I've tried a bunch of stuff, and so far I've not found the solution. So again, that's the aspect of trying to fix all this. So I'm going to come back into my Visual Studio and show you the code, and then we'll simply comment this out so this doesn't become a problem. Notice that the map.jpg file, since running my application, has been updated. Notice the difference in time. We've gone from, I think it was 2:11 p.m. to 7:38 p.m., which is our current time. We should also notice there's another Excel file here that was not there a few moments ago, and that's because our executable written in C# created this Excel file, which is an updated version of the original states. So named it states copy. I want to open that file so you can see what happened there. So here's my Excel file, statescopy.xlsx. And what I did programmatically through my C# application was change the contents of cell A1, which talked about the various states, and
instead changed that to change programmatically by C#, just so you can see that that's what happened. And I made the color blue. And then as I was reading in the 50 states, I also changed the formatting in column M for party. If the governor was Republican, I made it a background of red with text to white, and a Democrat, I made it blue with text to black. Actually, I don't think I even changed the text. I just left it as is. So that formatted that column for all 50 states. And then saved that file back out as a copy, retaining my original then intact. So let's take a look at the project in Visual Studio. Again, my project is named Excel Backend, and my form size here is 816 by 602. I just kind of did that visually. Usually I'll make that a multiple of 5, so maybe 815, 600. I have a button here called BTN Get Excel Data. That's going to go out and grab our Excel file and import the data from Excel, as well as make some changes to the Excel file and save it out as a new copy. As it reads the data in, it's going to update all of these different labels inside my panel. So we get the state name, LBL state, the state abbreviation as LBL abbreviation, the date it became a statehood, LBL statehood, LBL pop 2010, 2010, that's the population from the 2010 census, and then LBL pop 2016, that's the estimated population in 2016, and then do a little calculation and show the growth. Now all of this data is going to be stored in a class called StateInfo, and in the StateInfo class, I believe is where I created the percentage here. We have a label for governor, LBL governor, LBL age, that's the age of the governor, and LBL party in terms of which party he or she belongs to. That data is all going to be read from my Get Excel data and placed into a list of instances of my StateInfo C# class. I also have buttons here to go to the very first record, that's going to be Alabama, the previous record, if we're not on the first record, showing us which state we're looking at out of the 50, the next record, and then the last record, which would be Wyoming. Here's my picture box. By the way, the names of these are BTN first, BTN previous, the label is LBL current, BTN next, and BTN last. And I have a picture box. I didn't name it, just picture box 1. This is where the map's going to be shown. So let's take a look at the code. I'm going to get my properties out of the way. We'll take a look at the code for the Get Excel Data button. So a couple things here. In order to work with Excel, I went to the project menu and said Manage NuGet Packages. And I imported by browsing this NuGet package of Microsoft.Office.Interop.Excel. Now notice this is working with the Office 2013 version and not the most recent version. There are other files out there to work with Microsoft Office, so you probably want to keep a look to see if there's something newer. But this allows me then to work with Excel from C#. And it's basically just adding in a library or a framework that we can utilize that wouldn't be part of C# just out of the box. Then in my code, I added using Microsoft.Office.Interop.Excel as well as the using system.io. And I think I ended up not using file stream. That was something I was working on and trying to get that file to unlock. Okay, so here's our class level variables. I have a string called path. That's going to be the path of my application, and the Excel file is going to be in that same path. I have a workbook named WBK. That's for our Statesxlsx file, and then a workbook for map, WBK map, and that's going to be our state map.xlsm file. The worksheet here is going to be our StateInfo worksheet of the first workbook, and the WSheet map is the map worksheet of the second workbook. Here's my list that's going to have type StateInfo. We'll look at that class in just a minute. I call it state data. We're going to create that new list. I want to keep track of the current state we're looking at, and that's going to be this integer of current rec, set it to 0. And then by this Microsoft.Office.Interop.Excel, I am able to create an application link to a variable I just called Excel that is that application. When I load the form, I'm going to find the path of my current project, the executable, set the path. I'm going to set the path in for the different workbooks, and I did recommend that these be read-only. Okay, so then here is our code for the BTN Get Excel Data click event. I'm going to set the cursor to wait cursor because this is going to take a few seconds. I want the user to realize that there's a process happening. And that's going to be the little spinning wheel. Then I'm going to set my WSheet worksheet global variable to that StateInfo. I'm going to set cell 1-1, and when we're talking about Excel rows and columns in C#, we start counting with 1 and not 0. It's a little unusual. We would think we start with 0, but it's just the way that NuGet Package is set up to transfer information between the two. So column A is going to be a 1, row 1 is a 1. So this is that home cell A1 in Excel, and then I'm going to get the value of it, and I'm going to change that value to change programmatically by C#. I'm going to set the color to blue and set the size to 24. I'm going to create a string of that new information because I'm just simply going to show that in a message box, what the old value was and what the new value was. And that can be commented out. It's really not necessarily showed that, but I wanted to demonstrate that C# is making changes to our Excel file. So it's writing data back out. I have a variable called last row set to 0. And what I'm going to do is just this little loop. Let's say I don't know how much data is here. I'm going to assume that there's less than 20,000 lines. My data starts on row 3. And I'm going to be reading my Excel file until I get to a row that doesn't have any value. That's that value, that first cell in column A. If its value is null, there's nothing there, then I'm going to set the last row to the row above that and break. Okay, so that's going to help me find out what that last row is if I don't know how much data is there. Now in this case, I know there's 50 states, and that's not going to change. I didn't need to code this in. I could have said last row equals 53 or whatever it is. But I wanted to show you how you can find where your data ends. Same thing for the last column. I wanted to figure out what's that last column that has data. So here I have a last column value, and then I look for the last column by going across the second row, row 2, until I find there's nothing there. That's going to be my column headers. Then I'm going to set the headers to be yellow. I forgot to mention that earlier when we looked at the old versus the new spreadsheet, but we changed the column headers in row 2 to yellow. So that was a formatting change. Then I changed the party. And again, here I'm looking at going through a loop, going from row 3 to the last row. And if the last column, which is the party column, if it says Democratic, we're going to change it to Dodger blue. If it says Republican, we're going to change it to red and white. And then I'm transferring the data to my StateInfo instances in my list. So I'm going to create a temp list here, read each cell in the row, and add each cell value to my temp list, and then add that list to a new instance of StateInfo in my state data list. Once that's done, I'm going to set the cursor back to default, and here's where I save the file. So I do a WBK, that's our workbook.save as, specifying the path, and my new file name, which is Statescopy.Xlsx. Alternatively, you could just save the current file. I wanted to keep a copy of it. And then I simply tell it to close the workbook. And now I'm going to call a method called showStateInfo and pass it 0. That 0 is going to be the first state. So this is the index of my 50 states going from 0 to 49. Here's my StateInfo. If the index is greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 49, so make sure that's a valid index, I'm going to set all of those label text values to, I'm going to set the value to the state information within that state data list. So that's what all of this does. I'm going to set that LBL current to show which index number I'm looking at, update the index number, and then here's my try catch where I'm calling a method called update image index. And this is where my problem is that has an error in creating that map chart. So because it crashed on me earlier, I'm just going to comment that out. We're not going to have that run, but I'll show you what I was attempting to do. And then here's where I update the image of the picture box to that map.jpg that's getting updated as a new bitmap. I have my exception that would show where the error is. Unfortunately, it hangs here, and it's in that calling of the Excel macro from my C# that I think where the problem is. Here are the methods for those buttons to cycle through the state information for each of the 50 states. And then finally, here is my attempt to update the map image, in which I tried, again, setting the cursor to wait cursor, setting the map worksheet to the worksheet of map, going through each of those 50 states and setting that second column values to 0, so everything's being zeroed out. And then whatever index is being passed, the state I want to show, I simply set that cell in the worksheet to a 1 rather than a 0, and that will then update the map. And then also set the cell in E1, that's this 1,5, to the name of the state. And here's where I run that macro, excel.run map test. That creates the new version of map.jpg. And again, I do that all in a try catch, so if something goes wrong, this happens. It never runs the exception because it hangs here the second time. The first time it works great. Set my cursor back to default. And then I was also experimenting a little bit with closing that map file when I exit the application. If the program hangs, this never gets executed. So that's my code. Well, before I run this, let me show you the StateInfo CS class file. So I created a class called StateInfo, added it to my project. Here are the setters and getters for the different properties. And I probably should have capitalized each of these since we're using the public string. And then here is the constructor, in which we're going to pass it a list, and each of the strings of that list, that's going to come from that temp file we saw when we read the data from Excel. And I just have a comment here of what those different strings are. And in some cases, those strings need to be converted, such as statehood needs to be converted to a date time object using that year, month, day column or data. And then the most populous city was a no or yes in Excel, and I'm changing that to a Boolean expression of true and false. And then I also have for the birthday a convert date string to date time that I created as a method that takes that date format out of Excel. So you see I put a comment here that the way it's formatted, the underlying data is actually using slashes. So I wanted to look for those slashes and then find those locations and figure out the numbers for the month, date, and the year, and create a date time object from that information. If something goes awry, then I'm going to create it as January 1st, 1900. I also have some methods to get the governor's full name, where I'm going to swap the first name and last name, so it's not last comma first, but rather it's first space last. And then figure out the governor's age based on his birth date, including today's date and whether he's had his birthday yet this year or not. So that's the code that I've created for the StateInfo class. Now let's run our application. So I'm going to get the Excel data. There's our change being made to cell A1. It's reading in the data from those 50 states. It's saving my copy out and asking me to verify I want to save that. I'm going to say yes. And so here now is our state for Alabama. And now these buttons, I can show you how they work. It just simply goes through the different states. Of course, it's not updating our map. If I want to go to the very last one, that's going to be Wyoming. And I can go backwards or go to the first one, which is Alabama. So that's how we can work with Excel in C#. By the way, if we're using other charts such as a pie chart or bar chart, those can much more seamlessly be brought directly into C#. Currently, that NuGet package does not support the map chart. And that's why I was trying this version of using a macro to save that out and then import that back in to the picture box. Hopefully in a new version of that NuGet package, or maybe a different NuGet package, this would be supported directly. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.